Now we're ready to create a new KPI. I've already completed the form view for this KPI. Let's review this KPI. We have a name, and notice that the name does not have brackets around it like it does for measures. Then we have an associated measure group, and then for the value, we need to set up a new calculation that computes the sales growth percent. So let's create that calculation now. And here's the expression where we're taking the sales growth for the current time period and dividing it by the sales amount for the previous time period. Now we're using this inside of a conditional expression because we have a division operation here. Anytime we're doing a division, it's a good idea to test that value with the isEmpty function. So I've taken the isEmpty function and placed the tuple inside there, and then if that winds up not having a value, then we'll get a null value returned. Otherwise, it'll go ahead and perform the math. That way we don't get a divide by zero error when we go back in time and a period of time just simply doesn't exist. So we use that for our value expression. Then in our goal, we're going to compare our sales growth percent from the previous time period and multiply it by 1.05%, and that's our goal. Now for the status, we're using a function, KPI value of sales growth, comparing our value to the goal, and instead of using a tuple, here we can use functions to reference our KPIs, and here we put the KPI name inside of double quotes. So for our first condition, we're saying that if the value is above 85%, then we're going to return a 1. Otherwise, if it's greater than 50% of our goal, then we'll return a 0. Otherwise, we'll turn a -1. And those values will translate into some indicator, so a shape or a gauge or a road sign as we've selected here. So the 1 will return a green road sign with an upward pointing arrow, a 0 will return a yellow road sign, and a -1 will return a red road sign pointing downwards. Then for our trend, we're comparing our KPI value to the KPI value of the previous member, so we can create tuples with our KPI value functions. So if it's greater than the previous time period, we'll return a 1. If it's equal, we will return a 0, otherwise a -1. And those values translate into images with our arrows, with the upward pointing arrow for a 1 and a downward pointing arrow for a -1. Unless we're using the reverse status arrow, in which case a 1 will point downward and a -1 will point upward. We'll use the standard arrow for this KPI. Now to test this, we'll go ahead and deploy the project, but to view our KPI, we have to use the KPI browser built into the designer here, not in the Cube browser like we normally do. Now if you're using some other presentation tool like Excel, you would be able to use the KPIs. And with our KPI browser, we need to specify a date period in order to be able to get the status and trend to show so that we can see whether things are changing over time. If we change to a different time period and then click in the interface, we can see that the value and the goal change, but our status and trend did not, based on the rules defined for status and trend. So let's look at another time period. And here we see that our values change again, and the status is now green with an upward pointing trend.